the only reason I'm doing this, IRI, is because, look, Hassan doesn't like me very much. I'm not doing this because I love Hassan. Okay, he said I'm a pervert. Okay, so he doesn't like me very much. The only reason I'm doing that is I think we need to make sure to always be at least have the good faith voice somewhere when talking about people we disagree with in some way. Sure. Because if not, it's just a hate spiral and we just get super vitriolic. And so my olive branch to Hassan is that he's stupid.
People seem to be interested in Israel, so
yeah, people were asking me to talk to you or ask you about your position on Israel Palestine. I don't know much about your position on Israel Palestine, so I'm coming here with a general blank slate. I know that it's personal for you, and I want to acknowledge that before getting into a conversation with you because of your ties to like kibbutzes, your family side to kibbutzes and stuff like that. So what's your general position?
Well, you're right. It is personal. I'm a citizen of Israel. I have dual citizenship. I was born there, brought here as a baby, and naturalized. My dad said they walked me into the office and I became an American citizen before I was like 6 months old. But all my family is over there. Well, half my family that I talk to, and they are living on kibbutzes that are 12 kilometers away from where the attacks happened. So it's basically my community that was brutalized by Hamas. So, and rockets continue to fly over. And so I'm very supportive of Israel doing what they have to do. I don't see any alternative. That's kind of been my biggest argument is like, I understand the loss of civilians is tragic. And I genuinely think it is because it's not in Israel's interest to kill any civilians because it creates more terrorists. It makes people upset. It makes them mad. And so I'd love to see as few casualties as possible, but Israel is facing an existential threat. And so in their eyes, they're going to do whatever they have to do to eliminate the ISIS that lives next door to them. And again, the rockets continue to fire and they're concerned about others getting into the fight like Hezbollah. And so they're trying to send a message that we're going to go goblin mode. So that's pretty much my position on it. So people have been very mad because I'm like, you don't care about they say you don't care about the Palestinian children killed and you don't care about Palestinians. It's like, I can't bring up the brutality that happened on October 7th when 1,200 plus people were tortured, murdered, killed, and brutalized. I can't bring that up without somebody screaming at me that 5,000 children have been killed in Gaza.
Yeah,
what do you think?
I the first thing I want to acknowledge is that no nation state could ever go through what Israel went through on October 7th and not do something. Whether it's due to the fact that it would actually increase their national security, whatever they would do, or just like psychologically, like the response cannot be literally nothing. I do fear though, and I do fear a lot, because I fear that sometimes, we're repeating very recent mistakes and we have to make the same mistake again over and over and over again in quick succession in order for it to really get driven home. World War I, World War II, many of the same issues led up to the second. And I fear that in the need to want to do something, because people know that something had to be done, people will just jump to do something, not knowing whether or not it's going to, not only not knowing if it's going to solve the issue, even if there's good reason to believe that it probably isn't going to solve the issue in the long term. And for me, my big concern is making it so that there's this large military operation into the Gaza Strip, God forbid any sort of regional war, and then Israeli soldiers die, Palestinians die, more Israeli civilians die from rocket fire, and then we're just going to be here again 20 years from now with some sort of Israeli withdrawal after a failed occupation. And then instead of Hamas, it's going to be Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Nothing's been solved. We're in the same exact position, but with 50 to 100,000 more dead. Just like what happened during, for example, the invasion of southern Lebanon, which failed to deal with any of the Palestinian Fedayeen groups. It failed to deal with Hezbollah, any of the invasions of Lebanon. All of them failed to deal with these issues. And I don't think, when you saw like the assassination of the diplomat, the attempted assassination of the diplomat, or any of the instances that led to the invasions of southern Lebanon, you can look at all of those instances and say that something had to be done. If a diplomat's about to be assassinated, there should be some response. You can't just make it so that there's no order or any laws or response to those sort of things. But nobody can look at those wars after the fact and say the invasion of Lebanon was a success. The fighting against the Fedayeen was a success. And so I do think that this takes a certain amount of statescraft that Netanyahu's government is completely unwilling to do or engage with ever, that I just don't think that they're willing to make that calculation to try to find an alternative outside of doing what everybody expected his government to do, which is bomb the shit out of everything and take over the Gaza Strip.
Right. Yeah, and that's why I do think that Israel has thought about what comes next, and it sounds like they want to put an international force in there. Again, it's aspirational. I agree. I don't think it's in Israel's interest to reoccupy Gaza, and then bolster the Palestinian Authority if that's possible. But they can't have Mahmoud Abbas rolling in on an Israeli tank, So I'm hopeful, and I understand what you're saying too. Like, Israel will never see security or peace if the Palestinians do not have their own state. I genuinely believe that. I don't know what madness Hassan is on about with a single state, secular state dismantling Israel. I think the guy's anti-Semitic and a total prick. But I believe the Palestinians do have to self-govern in order for there to be peace for Israel.
Can I ask you why you
But
think...
it's not going to happen overnight.
Can I ask you why you think... Now, I think a single secular state is like a lovely idea, right? I think a lot of things are lovely. I think like Hamas and Netanyahu having an ice cream fudge sundae together is like a lovely idea. I just don't think it's practical. But why would it be anti-Semitic?
Well, I think he's spreading this anti-Zionism, which to me is just thinly veiled anti-Semitism. He seems to have this strange fascination with a Jewish state existing. And I don't know why that is. As 99% of Jews in this world believe in the state of Israel. They don't necessarily believe in the forever expansion of it. They don't support the settlers. I don't support the 700,000 settlers that have taken land in the West Bank. My family from kibbutzes grew up hating on those people. Don't support Benjamin Netanyahu, but the state of Israel existing, a safe place for Jews, is something that 99% of Jews in the world support. And so when I hear people say, I'm against Zionism, not Jews, it just feels like it's just hating on Jews, in my opinion.
Man, I think it really depends. I think a lot of times people use Zionism as a veil, as a way where you hear people say Zionists and you can hear the vitriol, the way they use it. They're basically just playing they're just switching one word, like the Zionist controlled banks, Zionist control. And you hear that, you're like, is there a lot of Israeli banks out there? And it's very clear what they're trying to get at. I do though think that there is a honest conversation to be had about in 1948, in the early development of the state of Israel, when the settlers were coming back during the period between the year 1900 and 1948, about what sort of government should have been founded, whether it was moral for people to buy up land from former Ottoman landlords and then kick the workers off that land, or move them off, kick them off and say, this is now our community, which we're going to build into a kibbutz, we're going to build into a nation. Right. I think there's an honest conversation about to have the morality of that, and somebody can honestly say that's wrong and not be anti-Semitic. In fact, there were Jews during the early period of Zionism that debated against Zionism. And so I do think that often we allow anti-Semitism a pass under the veil of Zionism, but I don't want to just discredit all anti-Zionist thought as anti-Semitic, and not only because it's reductive, but also I think it's unfair.
Well, I don't disagree with you, but I think it's rare that somebody is making an argument against Zionism and they are influenced by anti-Semitism, whether they know it or not. And so I rarely hear someone make an argument like that about, well, let's go back to 1948 and talk about what the original vision was. But for me, I feel like Zionism has been hijacked. Can I ask you,
do you think that's because of the dialogue online, and that's because where we mostly operate, and just the vitriol of the conversation, or do you think in academic settings, if somebody was a professor and walked up to you and said, yes, I'm an anti-Zionist, I studied history, colonial history and and the reason why is because of the X, Y, and Z, would you immediately assume that that person's like an anti-Semite, or like that person like doesn't like Jews, or would you like? I just want to understand. That's all.
Yeah, my first reaction is no, because I don't think most people are anti-Semites. I think they're saying some anti-Semitic things, just like I don't think people are racist. I don't think that there's like value in labeling somebody for the 99% of the time. I don't think there's much value in labeling someone as an anti-Semite or a racist or a fascist, right? It doesn't do anything. But they can do anti-Semitic things, and they can say racist things. And I feel like a lot of people are falling victim to that. But yeah, if somebody told me I've studied the history of the region and the idea of Zionism going back to 1948 and even, Theodore Herzl and all that, and before Jews had anywhere to go, I still think it's bad, then I can respect that. But I feel most of these people are getting nonsense from TikTok and the internet, and they're just, Zionist is the new slur. It's the new catch-all for I hate this thing. Everything I hate is Zionist. And to me, that's like thinly veiled anti-Semitism, because they don't even know what it means. They have no clue.
I do think a lot of people are using like Zionism as a catch-all term to describe everything they don't like. I am seeing that a lot. I am seeing people using it as like a veil to say Jew, but not say Jew, because they know if they say Jew banks or Jew media instead of Zionist media and Zionist banks, then they can get away with it.
Let me just clarify. I don't think that the majority of people saying Zionist are anti-Semitic. I don't think they realize what they're saying. That's kind of my big point.
I think that everybody, what I'm saying is about when I hear somebody say Zionist media or Zionist banks, I'm not giving that person that much leeway, because they're laying the words in a way specifically to kind of replace a word to get away with it. And I am seeing that more. I'm not saying that everybody that uses the term Zionist, obviously I just argued that not everybody who uses it is anti-Semitic, so I can't then immediately say that everyone who uses it is saying it to mean Jews. What I am saying that I do see a lot of people do that kind of mismatch with the words in order to get away with it.
But when you hear like Hassan say, "You Zionist pig, genocide supporting piece of shit," what do you really think he just cares about Zionism and like the expansion of Israel, or do you think there's more to it? Because I feel that the body of his work says there's more to it there. He tries to rewrite the history of the region. Like he said, I do think he's anti-Semitic, because he tries to rewrite the history of the whole region. Like when he was talking to his friend Ethan, shitting on him in their last conversation, he was talking about in 1948, Israel basically defeated some unarmed civilians. And Ethan said, well, what about Egypt's military? They were like a formidable military in the region. He's like, nah, not really. And Ethan said, why? Because they lost? And he was like, well, yeah. I was like, dude, come on. So there's something weird in this guy, that he just wants to hate on Israel and wants to promote Arabs nonstop, and something strange in his head that causes him to do that. That's anti-Semitism in my book. He hates on Jews.
I think it can be a combination of ignorance of the history and just like the way he engages, maybe possibly being like extremely hyperbolic. Or let me frame this for you a moment, because, for example, like I see Hassan make mistakes on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And it's much easier for me to explain the mistakes that he made through like America bad think and being just generally ignorant about the history and irresponsible with how he did his review and research. It's much easier for me to explain it through that than like hatred of Ukrainians, or just like anger towards Ukrainians, or this belief that Ukrainians are actually Russians, or this belief that Ukraine could be conquered. In fact, I think there's evidence to the contrary of that. And so if I was to try to determine if Hassan was actually anti-Semitic, I don't think him being like angry when he yells about Zionism is enough. As we both said, like, we don't think that somebody just using the word Zionist necessarily means that they're anti-Semitic. I would have to see him dog whistling, or I would have to see him using it to make an anti-Semitic argument. It's much easier for me to believe, either through just like America bad think, or just a general ignorance throughout the region, that any time that he sees like Israel interacting with history, he's just going to assume it's doing the wrong thing because it's America's main ally in the region, and it's a colonial state in his mind. And since it's a colonial state, it does the bad thing. including the times it did do the bad thing. And when you look at many of the things that Israel did engage in during that period, and you know that to be true, then it's going to be easy to believe anything that anyone says at all about Israel.
I think that's fair. I just maybe I'm a little more sensitive and I pick up a little thing here or there, but I don't hear him advocating for a Jewish state. And for some reason, it's always strange to me when people have a problem with the one Jewish state in the world. I don't think people know the history of what Jewish people have gone through over time. And Israel, some people will even argue it's not safe for Jews now. It's like, yeah, but you have to realize, like, you can be openly Jewish without harassment or ridicule in Israel. And you can't do that anywhere else in the world. And you don't know that unless you're Jewish. You just don't know it. And so I just don't hear him saying, listen, I think what happened here in the region due to history is wrong, but I don't have any beef with the Jewish people. I don't have a beef with Jewish people having a state, and he calls it an ethno state. I mean, come on, this is ridiculous. 20% of the country are Arabs. They even have Arabs in the high courts and such. But I just don't hear that other side of it. You know what I'm saying? That's when I start to think someone's anti-Semitic, because they don't give the argument for the other side. Like, I see where the other side's coming from.
But I don't think I ever see Hassan ever give the argument for the other side. So I don't think this is something special he does for Israel-Palestine. This is something he does for any issue where he believes something. So I don't think this would... I just don't think it indicates any level of anti-Semitism. I just think it's just a general pattern of behavior that Hassan probably has when looking at not only foreign policy issues, but all political issues.
Okay. I mean, I respect your opinion. The vitriol he uses towards Israelis just reminds me of thinly veiled anti-Semitism. Raises a lot of red flags, you know?
Yeah.
It'd be like me talking about.
Before, I wanted to respond to it. What was the thing you said before? What you just said? I completely forgot. I wanted to respond to it.
Like the Jewish people having a state, or
yeah, I did want to say that I could understand somebody saying, looking at Israel's laws and looking at laws about interfaith marriage, which, by the way, wasn't not just a problem within Israel, it was a problem within the Ottoman Empire as well. Or looking at how it treats gay marriage, even if it's better for the region, because of its nature as a Jewish state and because of right-wing rabbis and because of right-wing groups, they still fight to keep that religious doctrine of, you know, not being able to marry as gay people in Israel on the books, the best of their ability. Somebody can look at that type of religious ruling of a state and be against it in principle. And I think somebody can be against it in principle, because if somebody's like, I don't like the Islamic Republic of Iran, I don't like how the imams run it, I don't think it's authoritarian, I think it's wrong to subjugate other people that way, I'm against it. I think somebody can be principally against that type of setting up of a state, period. Outside, now, if somebody was especially like, I don't like how Israel forces everybody to do this on its land, but also I'm perfectly fine with how Indonesia forced, like, then I would call that out hypocrisy, and it'd be like, well, what's the special status here? What's the thing that makes this different? But I do think that somebody can be principally against it and not be doing it based on anti-Semitism.
Well, okay, sure. But I mean, we can point out Israel's flaws, and they've got a lot of room to go when it comes to civil rights. But I mean, you want to compare that to what's going on in Gaza? I mean, they just strung up 2 people and killed them in the streets in the West Bank. You know what I mean? So I think Israel's
well, what West Bank violence is a spiraling, chaotic mess right now.
I'm talking about Palestinians killing their own. They said they were Israeli collaborators.
Well, there's also, I don't want to get into the back and forth. There was also a problem with an Israeli killing their own recently, wasn't it? There was a gunman and he was taken out, and then he got killed by 2 reservists. Wait. That's totally different. So some guy came to try to stop a terrorist attack, and 2 soldiers accidentally shot him. That's a lot different than Gaza Hamas militants hanging from a tower to Israel collaborators. I do think it's different than the hanging, but there has been instances of lynching in the West Bank as well. I mean, I just don't think a fellow Israeli in some instances, yeah. But wait. I don't think it would make a tremendous difference on whether it was immoral or moral, whether you're lynching someone of the other group or your own group. Like if I
haven't heard of any lynchings in the West Bank. It might have happened, but I haven't heard of anything like this. But listen, I'm just saying we can go tit for tat.
There have been some lynchings in the West Bank.
Lynchings?
Yeah,
really?
Yeah, settler lynchings. Yeah.
Okay, I'd love to see some examples of this. I won't challenge you on it, but I mean, like this.
Sure. I mean, I've posted some of the footage of
I've heard of some abuse.
On my social account. If I could send it to you later. I mean, it's like a month old now, but I mean, I could send it to you later.
I don't disagree that there's abuse by settlers. These people are nuts, and they're
sometimes settlers.
Sure.
I mean, settlers are the main culprit. Sometimes military, but the extremist settlers are definitely at the spear point of any abuses towards Palestinians at the West Bank.
Fair enough. But look, I'll give you another example of Hassan. Right now, he's like quote tweeting Quds News Network, which is affiliated.
I saw that. That fucking blew me away that he actually was retweeting them. But again, that right there. Okay, for those of you who don't know, they're like the media arm of like Islamic Jihad. Right, so
which has no government affiliation at all. They're a militant group.
Yeah. They are a militant group based in the Gaza Strip. For a while, people used to say that they were, until recently, that people stopped saying it. But Israeli officials would say this too, that they were like Hamas but more extreme. Right? I don't want to get into all the specifics, but that's how they were usually explained. They are not a good, unbiased primary source of news unless the evidence is overwhelming and unapologetically like impossible to refute. For example, I saw something similar to this. I saw right-wingers. This is not Hassan, but I saw right-wingers quote tweeting Iranian backstate media's like fake leaks about U.S. intel of American soldiers, like American generals, emailing other departments that they don't even have. That's not how that would work. But emailing other departments saying like, we're just too woke and gay to be able to fight the Great Iran, and they like right-wing content creators just like eating up like true. Oh, I oh my God, they got us pegged, and that stuff is. People are not only falling for misinformation, but that is state-backed misinformation, state-backed media. Now, it's bad that he quote tweeted them or used them as a source. What was the story? Because I never actually got to see what the story was, but I saw that he quote tweeted them, and that was already wild enough for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know the story. I'll tell you in a second. But I mean, the fact that he's quote tweeting and spreading Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad propaganda. I mean, these are people that want every single Jew killed, you know? So that's what makes me kind of wonder what's going on here. The story that he quote tweeted was this 13-year-old boy 8 years ago was caught attacking Israeli settlers with his 15-year-old cousin. His cousin actually, they went on a stabbing spree. It's all caught on video. They went on a stabbing spree 8 years ago, and he didn't actually make contact with his knife, but he's in the video chasing people with his cousin, like right next to him with a knife in his hand.
Yeah, so I saw the video of them running, yeah.
Yeah, and so he ends up getting hit by a car before he can kill anybody, and everybody's like, and Hassan's out there saying, Hassan puts out a video that came out showing the police interrogating him afterwards, and the cops yelling at him, and Hassan's like, this is, and it says in the quote, in the tweet that Hassan linked, it said that the kid was kidnapped off the street by Israeli police and then tortured out of him. That's what the Quds News Network said in the tweet.
No, that's not. Because the thing is, there was mistreatment towards the child afterwards. I guess. But the problem is that if you do not include the fact that he was involved in a stabbing spree, right? Even if he didn't directly end up stabbing someone, if I'm going around with you with a knife, going around and you stab people and I'm there with the knife, you know, going like this or whatever, I've involved myself in the crime. I have involved myself in the crime in a way. And that information was not included. And they're also Islamic Jihad's like news network. This wasn't like a stream thing. This was something he posted on Twitter, something he could have easily Googled, like what news network this is, could have looked into the facts. He wasn't doing it in the moment. You can watch that guy Willie Mack. He made a video that talks about it. It's a little short video he did put out like 2 days ago. He included me in one of his recent Hassan trashings, actually.
Nice.
Very
good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, when I see somebody spreading that, now, okay, let's be as charitable as possible to build on your argument for Hassan. He's just a dope who wants to see everything through anti-America and anti-Israel colonialism, whatever. Do you think that he's not aware of what Quds News Network is, and he doesn't, in theory, he doesn't support?
I can so easily believe he has no clue. I honestly,
well, then he's a jackass.
Look, I'm not an expert. Well, you know what? I would say I'm not an expert in Hassanology, okay? But I would say I'm a novice in Hassanology. But a theory that is working for me is if you try to explain something where Hassan got something wrong or messed up, 95% the answer is just ignorance. 95% is ignorance. Hassan streams for 12 hours a day talking politics. Not all of it is politics, but much of it is. And he's live reacting, even if he says he hasn't, live reacting to news often, trying to give opinions kind of on the spot. And a lot of it's developing news where he's just not going to have the necessary information. But this isn't developing news. I think it was probably something he just saw was like it pre-confirmed some of his biases that he believed, and so therefore he blasted it. I think it's much easier for me to believe that Hassan was like, oh, this is the Islamic Jihad News Network, I'm going to boost it because I want to, just like Islamic Jihad, kill all the Jews. I find that a much less likely scenario than Hassan just generally, as always, fucking up because he's ignorant about the news or situation, which seems to be the general trend.
Well, look, I could see that, but the fact is it's been pointed out to him after the fact, and he's made no apologies, made no retraction, nothing. I'd be horrifically embarrassed.
This is the second great section of Hassanology, and that's the fact that he's also unbelievably stubborn.
Well, then, no, but that's the thing. Stubbornness does not excuse bigotry.
Well, of course, is that an excuse? I'm more describing the behavior of a rhinoceros more than I'm endorsing when a rhino rundowns a baby gazelle, you know?
Just because he's stubborn, it doesn't exonerate him from being anti-Semitic. I mean, if someone points out to me that I'm spreading a source that is wants all Jews killed,
look,
and
I agree with you 100%.
And I'm
that
an
he shouldn't have
anti-Semite.
spread it. I mean, I've critiqued people from using like Press TV or working for Press TV before when that's a Iranian state news outlet that's promoted things like Holocaust denial. So I'm of the same vein of thought that this is wrong, and that's immediately when you said the Quds News Network, I was like, oh snap, really? Damn, they're terrible. But it's just, man, it's so much easier to say Hassan's a himbo who don't know nothing.
Sure it is, but I think I'm not saying this about you, but I feel like a lot of people do this and just say, oh, he's dumb, he doesn't know what he's doing. And I think it's not giving him enough credit. He's a smart guy. He's a brilliant businessman to get to where he is, the top 20 of Twitch. He's not a dumb guy. He knows what he's doing.
He knows some history. He knows streaming, but he was talking about like a news story amongst a million news stories of different instances of police interactions between different Palestinians and IDF soldiers, and he didn't know the background of this, saw it, confirmed his biases, reposted it. It's just, for me, it's just like such a clear like timeline of events for me to believe, for me to just like form in my head. That's so much easier than like he went out of his way to promote an Islamic Jihad outlet because he privately in his soul actually is super pro going out there and doing it all. But really, I'm not. The only reason I'm doing this, IRI, is because, look, Hassan doesn't like me very much. I'm not doing this because I love Hassan. Okay, he said I'm a pervert. Okay, so he doesn't like me very much. The only reason I'm doing that is I think we need to make sure to always be at least have the good faith voice somewhere when talking about people we disagree with in some way. Sure. Because if not, it's just a hate spiral and we just get super vitriolic. And so my olive branch to Hassan is that he's stupid.
Well, I can respect that, and I know where you're coming from, and I don't fault you for it. I'm not going to give you a hard time. I'm just trying to explain where I'm at. And there's other incidents, like he tried to explain the ripping down of the posters of the hostages as it's really bait to catch Arabs doing bad things so we can get them on video instead of it's actually people caring. Yes, he said this.
That's not.
So he can't. Yeah, it's just like everything the Jews do is bad, It's like always a Jewish plot, conspiracy, something. So I've had enough of him. And here's the thing.
Does he talk about Jewish plots and conspiracies?
No, he never says it like that. But I mean, come on. nobody comes out and just says it. But here's the thing. I see a pattern. And here's the thing. This is the language he understands. Okay. So you're not going to get his attention by saying, well, I don't think Hassan thinks this or that. You call him this label and he has to respond. And he seems to be feeling the pressure now because people are calling him anti-Semitic.
I mean, I understand the idea. Like, if you play soft with him, he's not going to pay attention. I guess I like to play hardball in a different way. I think my hour-and-a-half long video where it's like, here are the people directly of the country you're talking about why your takes are bad. Like, that's the way I like to play it, outside of just like, let me just hit you with the hard word, that's gonna piss you off. But I understand it. I understand it, trying to get his attention. And I do think he should be held to account. And this is the thing. While there's definitely elements of this war where I think we probably disagree, one thing that I will definitely not disagree is that when people either spread misinformation about an active ongoing war where people are dying, they need to be checked, and people with immense influence are making these mistakes need to be checked, because streamers are not going to fire themselves. Streamers are not going to give themselves like suspensions in pay. Streamers are not going to really penalize themselves. The only penalty a streamer or any content creator will have, and I hope I'm held to the standard as well, I hope all content creators are held to the standard, is when viewers hold them to that standard. And like when viewers hold them to a standard, like, okay, you've made this mistake so many times that now I feel like I'm not going to watch your content. Or, hey, you've made this mistake so many times that we can't ignore it anymore. We have to have a longer conversation about it. It doesn't even have to be now the streamers are going to like spiral and everybody leaves them. But there has to be some sort of holding to account outside of just a streamer's personal responsibility, because we've seen so many different people not be able to rely on that personal responsibility to fix the issue, whether it's because they haven't fully processed that they have the problem, or because they refuse to. I don't know.
I agree. There's actually a reward for causing more controversy and not backing down, right? You're rewarded with more attention and more views and such. What I think is actually hurting Hassan is his buddy Ethan, because he refused to have any compassion for his friend Ethan, who is
I never
Israeli
watched that last stream. What was it like?
You should check it.
I gotta know. Neither of us are Hassan fans, so I guess we're gonna get any interpretation that's super beneficial towards him, right? I wish I had like a Hassan fan on the phone that I could call in, and anytime, like, give me the Hassan context that I could, like, a button I could press. But how did that conversation between Ethan and Hassan go? I never watched it.
Well, I didn't see. I mean, basically the gist is Ethan coming to him saying, listen, I feel your audience is out of control and they're getting cues from you, and that comes from your mods, and they're being racist towards me and just nasty. And Hassan's like, well, the reason why they're doing that, Ethan, is because you're saying nasty things. And Hassan took no accountability, no responsibility for his audience or his mods or anything, and they had a friend breakup. I mean, he was trying to rewrite history. Like I said, in that conversation, he talked about Egypt's army wasn't a big deal, which is total bullshit. Israel had like 3 tanks, and Egypt had 50 plus. They were equipped by the British. I mean, you would know better than me. But he also was saying like Czechoslovakia didn't really provide them with weapons, and it's just like every excuse in the book for why Israel, like, is bad and cheated or whatever. I don't know. So he just refused to listen to his friend. That's basically the gist of it. Ethan came to him like crying, basically like, you just refuse to see things from my point of view. And they talked about the from the river to the sea thing, saying you have to understand why people like me or Jewish people are offended by that, because 99% of people mean it in a bad way, even if people are saying it innocently.
I tried
to listen.
Oh, man, I wish I took more time to look into the history of the statement, because I was thinking in the shower, as I often like to think, and one of the things I was thinking about was the river to the sea quote. I was like, is there a way that this could not mean the elimination of Israel? And my finagle was, you could mean like, you could mean the Gaza Sea, the sea in Gaza, and you could mean the River Jordan that touches the West Bank. If you can finagle it into a certain way, you could mean that everybody within Israel, or anybody that writes a return to Israel, or anybody within Gaza, the West Bank, which was the mandate of Palestine, they shall have political freedoms. There's all different ways to wiggle around it. The problem is, though, when I hear a large crowd of people chanting that, I don't know what one person means and what the other person means. And this is a lot of problems with somewhat vague political slogans, is the vagueness of it allows you to cast a bigger net, but that also means you've casted a bigger net, and some of the people you've caught might not be of the most well-meaning.
Well, look, I don't think every person means the elimination of Israel and the Jews when they say it. I think a lot of people say it innocently. The problem
I
is,
assume that most of the people
95
on Twitter, most people saying it probably don't mean that either. I mean, I don't think the majority of people saying it think that.
Maybe, but we always listen to the party that's affected by the language for how we should be using it, right? Like when it comes to marginalized groups, you listen to the marginalized group. And when the Jews are saying, listen, we think this means you want to kill us because of X, Y, and Z, why is it not respected when Jewish people have a problem, but every other marginalized group gets respect? And that's my beef with it. It's not about what people mean when they say it. It's about how it's being interpreted by a large number of people and not respecting that.
I think that people can respect their concerns and ask people what they mean when they say it. I think that makes sense. I will say, though, one thing that is bothering me is that the Likud party slogan is the same thing, but just in reverse, which was like, it was basically from the river to the sea, Israel will dominate everything. I forget the exact slogan, but you know what I'm talking about. I think you've probably heard their Likud party slogan. It's give us all the land, mine, 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 mine. It's something along those lines. And that gets no comment. That gets no discussion. That has been normalized for 20, 30 years. That's the ruling party in Israel. And so when people talk about negotiations, people talk about peace deals, and people talk about coming together, circle kumbaya, it is a little strange that in the American political spectrum, that's not even a discussion on mainstream media. In fact, if you were to ask the Fox News host or CNN host, I think most of them probably wouldn't even know that the Likud party slogan is the exact same thing, but in reverse.
Well, look, Israel, its politics, as you know, are tough. The previous two prime ministers went to prison for corruption, and Bibi Netanyahu is headed there too for the same reason. He's been in power for like 11 years total. This is not some pure democracy. Like this is a nasty government. And look at all the hundreds of thousands of people that were in the streets for weeks protesting the changes that he was proposing. So it's not like all of Israel supports this, right? Likud is a fringe element in Israel, and a lot of people are against it.
Okay. So, I mean, we could call Geert Wilders fringe in the Netherlands, and I would say until very recently, Geert Wilders was fringe in the Netherlands, but now he's the party. And once you are the ruling party, and once you're the ruling party, once you're the government in power, it's hard for me to call you fringe anymore when you are the political establishment. And Benjamin Netanyahu is the longest serving Israeli prime minister in history. And so it's hard for me to personally align the word fringe with the longest serving Israeli prime minister in history, because he has been able to keep himself through coalitions in power for a very long time. And I will say that this specific coalition is filled up with the most fringe elements ever, which has just made it even worse. That's how you got people like Ben Gvir, I believe was his name, Ben Gvir and power, who's pretty fascisty, pretty racist, pretty bigoted, not a great guy, super unsupportive of the ultra settlers. And you have people like that in positions of power, some of which are saying crazy stuff, like the agriculture minister saying, hey, maybe we'll just nuke Gaza. Having other ministers saying things like second Nakba, because this is the government that the Israeli state has created. But it's just, if we acknowledge
wait a second, though.
Okay, what do you want to say?
Well, I would argue we have these fringe elements here too. I can cite examples of GOP members saying insane things that are never going to happen, and I would argue that Donald Trump is the same in my eyes as Netanyahu. I don't think Donald Trump is the norm. I think he's fringe. Would you not agree? Like his views and his ideas are crazy, and I don't think the majority
Trump was
of people
not the longest serving president in U.S. history.
Yeah, but I mean, that's because we have a strong democracy.
Donald Trump's also no longer in office.
Right, but that shows, I mean, but that's not because of the will of the people necessarily. There's a lot of corruption in Israel, and there's a lot of problems with their democracy.
Let me grant you this comparison for a moment. Just let me just grant this for a moment, because I will say that there's definitely features of them both that are similar. I would actually make some comparisons between Putin and Netanyahu. I think they have features that are similar. They campaign together. 1/6 of Israelis are Russian. A lot of people don't know there's a lot of Russians in Israel, and they carries a lot of electoral influence. I would say he's too buddy with Mr. Putin. But let's say I grant that for a moment. God, I lost my train of thought. Could you remind me of your? Could you just say what you said again, and then I'll remember?
Just that Israel doesn't have a strong democracy, and that Donald Trump is fringe. He doesn't represent like the majority of views of the people. That's pretty much what I would say.
Okay.
Like that's when I say fringe, I'm not talking about some like, gadfly. I'm talking about an extreme element that happened to get into power through populism.
Okay, but if I acknowledge this comparison, I would not be confident in Donald Trump managing an invasion or invading another country and his government managing the occupation or choosing the people to manage the occupation. Part of the thing that was wrong with the invasion of Iraq was the people who were then chosen to manage the occupation. Many of those who didn't have experience whatsoever. I think the person who ended up rebuilding the Iraqi banking industry, his main experience on his form before being in working for the State Department was like being a fucking ice cream truck driver. And what I would be worried about when we're talking about Netanyahu's government is, do we trust him to not only manage an invasion, manage a possible occupation if it's going to happen, or be able to, considering his belief about a Palestinian state existing and considering, his party's belief about the relationship with the Palestinians, and his record on managing the security state in Israel being quite poor, do we trust him to manage this? And do we trust him to make the right calls necessary to bring about a peaceful settlement and not continue this conflict in perpetuity, which has been his position for forever?
Sure. No, I think it's a valid concern. I look at like after 9/11, Bush had like an 80% approval rating or whatever. Like people rally behind the leader. Israel, in their eyes, are facing an existential threat, and so they're rallying behind their leader temporarily. I mean, it sounds like he's gone as soon as this is over. But you're right. Maybe it's in his interest then to keep the war going as long as possible because they won't get rid of him. So there are valid concerns there. Trust me. But I think in times of war, you rally around the leader, and unfortunately, it is Netanyahu.
If we both acknowledge that Netanyahu's government doesn't really respect democracy that much, doesn't have a deep respect for institutions, we both say he's nasty, he's made a very nasty government. Are you confident that the Israeli military and his government and the guidelines that they're putting forward, that they're managing this war in a way that is both proportional and discriminate?
Well, I am. My confidence is increased by the U.S.'s involvement, and that they don't have a free hand to do whatever they want. I mean, you have to remember too, dude, this is the largest terrorist attack against Americans since 9/11, and they still have a bunch of our people. That's true. Nobody talks about that, and everybody's just like, woe is the Palestinians. They killed 31 Americans on that day. And so the United States is pissed too. And I mean, I've seen Antony Blinken and Biden, I think, slow their roll a bit. But here's my bigger question. What's the alternative? Like what else are they supposed to do? And people say, well, don't indiscriminately bomb and don't kill as many civilians. What do you do when they're hiding behind the civilian population and there's no other way to get rid of them? Like, what do you do? These are not reasonable people to deal with. And they have 200 hostages, or did up until very recently. I mean, what is Israel supposed to do? I keep hearing people say anything, don't kill civilians, anything, but nobody can offer any solution.
You can always vote for Cornel West.
Oh yeah.
No, but So the first thing is about the American hostages. I mean, obviously, I believe that Israel had a full right to go after the people who were involved in the attack and eliminate those specifically involved and try to do everything within their power to get their hostages back. But I am concerned about reports of hostages possibly dying in the bombing. I'm also concerned.
Well, who's reporting that? Who's reporting that?
Well, it's just, well, that's why I said I'm just concerned, because we don't know, because it's still, we still don't know. It's
I
vague.
think that's very important, because they've recovered a couple bodies and these people had bullet holes in the back of their heads. You know what I mean? And they supposedly were killed by airstrikes too. And even that old lady who was released was supposedly killed by an airstrike. So I don't believe shit coming out of Hamas, including all their numbers too. According to them, no militants have been killed at all. It's all women and children.
But my main point is going to be here, putting aside the concerning reports, anything like that. My main point is going to be, as an American, if we're thinking about it through that perspective, I want to get the American hostages out, I want to get the American hostages home, and I want to protect Americans in the region that are being endangered by an escalation in violence. That means American troops and bases in Iraq, that means American troops and bases in northeastern Syria, working with the SDF to continue Operation Inherent Resolve, continue the operation against ISIS, etc. And I do not see how we can protect those people still in Hamas custody without negotiating further, which might include some sort of ceasefire. Because I don't understand any scenario where Hamas is going to give up the last hostages for just like extensions of ceasefires, knowing that once they give away that last hostage, they've lost all the leverage.
But their demands are insane. We had to release 1,000 prisoners, people that were involved in terrorism, to get one soldier back who they held for 5 years. So we know they'll hold these people for 5+ years. And what can we even give them to get back 30 soldiers and Americans? I mean, there's nothing we can give these people. There's no way Israel's willing to give them what they want.
So what, I mean, I don't know exactly what's going to be necessary to be given. Probably a lot of prisoner releases. Some of them might be people who are being held without trial, who might possibly be innocent. Others might be just straight up terrorists or people who probably engaged in terrorism. If we looked at the last batch, which was a combination of all different types of people. But if our main priority is getting these people out alive, you're talking about what's the alternative to the military operation? What is the alternative to negotiating for their release? Is it some special forces raid when we find out where they're holding all of the last of them? What if they're holding one, some in one location, but the rest spread over 5 other locations? Would it be like a big simultaneous raid? Because what if they kill them once they figure out we're trying to break them out? There's so much pushing me to think that negotiating their releases going to be a priority. Now you can negotiate for the release through a lot of different ways. Like I've read Arms and Control. Like there's a lot of different ways, including force, that you can do to try to negotiate the release. But I don't know how you don't negotiate their release for the last batch without agreeing to something that allows Hamas not to be completely eradicated.
Well, they can allow them to leave. That's what they did in what was it, in Beirut or whatever, with Yasser Arafat.
That I think might be possible, but then doesn't that undermine the Israeli military goal of eradicating Hamas if you allow Hamas to leave and then go into the international scene to probably return as the Taliban did to Afghanistan after they fled into Pakistan after our invasion in 2001?
Well, Israel's primary goal is to eliminate Hamas's abilities to terrorize Israel from the Gaza Strip. So if Hamas is not there anymore, technically they can't do it from the Gaza Strip. Could they do it from other places? Yeah. But Israel's committed to killing them anywhere in the world, and they will spend the next 10 years hunting them down like dogs anywhere in the world to kill them. But if temporarily they can let them escape and save their hide for one more day, I think Israel would be open for that. If they didn't have, because they're not.
Maybe,
I know
but
what
that
you're saying.
also means this means that this war that Israel's going to fight might become like our war on terror. That they're going to have some version of an AUMF, some authorization for use of military force if they're going to take this operation global. That means, of course, they already have an AUMF, specifically a modern one, a new one for this.
I don't know about any sort of legislation, but Israel has no problem killing people. I mean, they just remember like that remote machine gun on a truck that they killed a nuclear scientist, I think in Iran. Like they have no problem killing people around the world, and they've already committed to doing so.
Okay, I mean, I guess that they can try, but we do both agree that they have to negotiate for the last hostage releases. You can't just like keep hitting them with a hammer and expect hostages to fall out.
Well, my argument perhaps against that would be, look what they've accomplished with the hostages they got out. You think any of these hostages would have been released without Israel going in and going goblin mode? I don't think so. Hamas, some people told me they could have had this deal on day one. No, they couldn't.
I don't know what I don't know if they could have had this deal specific. I'm sure there would have to be some military response period, and that military response would be leveraged in whatever deal was eventually negotiated. But again, I don't know how these people, I just want to find some consensus here that we both agree that they're going to have to negotiate and people are going to have to be exchanged for the remaining prisoners, because there is a political debate about whether, like, well, this person stabbed so-and-so, so should we really be releasing these people engaged in terrorism for this baby? And I hear this debate going on, and my mind at the end of the day is we have to save as many innocent lives as possible.
Okay, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about people that are held under administrative detention. There's only like 2,000 people max that are under that right now, and that's not who Hamas is going to trade these soldiers for and like the men of fighting age. There's no way they're going to make a deal for those people. I'm sorry. They're going to want convicted terrorists let out of prison, people involved in murder with blood on their hands, and Israel's
that's what I'm saying. Like that's what they're going to ask for. And so the question, because this is, for example, I remember talking to you about Brittany Griner. Right. And when I talked to you about Brittany Griner, I was very reserved about letting go the gigantic arms smuggling war criminal that had funneled funneled weapons to every corner of the globe, fueled instability that killed God knows how many people. Right. And we were trading him for a football star who smokes some pot. And look, I love 420, but I love people not getting torn apart by machine gun bullets in West Africa more, right? But we made that trade, and I felt uncomfortable about it. And I remember you telling me, well, like, how else were we going to get Brittany Griner out? So I got to bring that example you brought to me back to you now and be like, how else are we going to get these hostages out?
Well, Victor Boot was towards the end of his sentence. He wasn't personally involved in murdering people. You could make the argument he provided the arms that did so. And I guess you could paint the picture that he's responsible for the death of a lot of people.
Well, I mean, what do you mean paint the picture? I mean, he is. He absolutely is. He's an arms smuggler.
As an arms dealer? Okay,
yeah, an arms smuggler, I think, is responsible for death.
I think it's a fair...
Is a fentanyl dealer responsible for death?
A fentanyl dealer responsible for death.
Yes. If somebody giving poison,
I think there's some liability on them for sure. Okay. I think it's a valid argument and it's a fair point. I'd have to think about it further. But I know that in Israel, the demands that they're asking are going to be just outrageous and not realistic.
Of course, they're gonna. That's why we have. I mean, I understand that just calling for negotiations is not the solution. I hear it so much with you. Like, you can't just say talk and say talking in and of itself is a solution, because if you have two positions that are just impossible to mix together, then like talking isn't necessarily going to fix it every time. But I don't see any other path for these prisoners getting out, if that's the goal, outside of talking in some way and figuring out a path to get them out. And that's going to probably at some point involve handing over some people that are not that, let's say, friendly.
But think about that, like how ridiculous that exchange is. You know, these are innocent people.
I mean, yeah, it's kidnapped. Awful. It's awful. Yeah. I think it's absolutely awful. I think when we're talking about POW exchanges, it's different. But we're talking about in some instances, it will be innocent people being exchanged for very bad people.
Right. Yeah. Here's the thing, and people don't like it. I just think Israel has to inflict a lot of pain on Hamas, and they have to send a message. And people don't like this. It sounds callous, but it's the truth. Like, Israel has to show Hamas, in order to free the Palestinian people of Hamas, because I think they're victims in this too, that they can't hide behind the people. Israel will go through anybody to get them. And that's why they went to the Al-Shifa hospital. And that's why they're going to stomp through Gaza and try to move the people out of the way as much as they can. But unfortunately, Hamas is preventing a lot of these people from moving. And they want the human shields. They want these people to die. They want their own people to die. They blew up their own people with like that truck bomb, if you remember, towards the beginning of the evacuation at the beginning of the conflict. So I just think that for too long, Hamas is hidden amongst these people. And I don't think the Palestinian people will ever get rid of Hamas unless Israel does this. And it sounds callous and it sounds horrific, but I just don't see any other way. Now, I agree with you. In the end, this will be settled with dialogue. In the end, it will. But I don't think Hamas comes to the table in a good faith way unless Israel starts smashing things like they did up until now to get 100 hostages out.
Man, there's a lot I want to respond to there. What was your first point? I'm sorry. You just said a lot.
I'm sorry. Just that the Palestinians are victims of Hamas as well. Perhaps that's what you want to respond to.
First, the thing I wanted to throw at you is, do you think Hamas's popularity has benefited or been hurt by Israel's response to the October 7th attack?
I think it's impossible to know, but I can't imagine the Palestinian people in Gaza who are suffering so tremendously for the last 6 weeks with a lack of food, medicine, having to leave their homes, and just the misery that they're in right now. I can't believe that they're like, hoorah, Hamas, way to go. Like, they know Hamas has brought this on them, and their lives, as bad as people may say they were before then, are 1,000 times worse right now with no end in sight. So I can't believe that Hamas has the people's support and they're enthusiastic and they've gained popularity. It doesn't make sense.
To a lot of them, though, I would imagine, even for the one, because Hamas was losing popularity, not only with the Palestinian people, but they were losing it with the entire region as well. But when you're sitting in a house and your neighbor's house gets blown up, or your house gets blown up, or any of your friends get killed, and the vast majority of the death that is happening in Gaza is from Israeli bombs, is from Israeli bullets, because Israel is the overwhelming power here in comparison. It dropped 6,000 bombs in 6 days at the start of this war, which did give me a lot of concern as to the proportionality of the bombing, because that was on a scale that we had never seen before from the Israeli Air Force. Definitely in an area that's like 14 miles wide. I mean, it's a very small area that's taking such a large amount of bombs. But I'm immoral. Thank you for the 5 gifted tier 1s. I appreciate it. God dang it. They interrupted me and I forgot what I was going to say. Fuck.
Hamas's popularity.
What I'm concerned about is Hamas gets bombed, and I see these little movie theaters they're making where everybody gets together, and all these people who have lost, I don't know, like maybe half their family, or have lost electricity, or lost their homes, or displaced, and they all get crowded in these little like outdoor movie theaters, and they project these images of IDF tanks blowing up, and everybody's in the crowd cheering, because in their mind, I would imagine for a lot of them,
immoral, morally corrupt.
Look at those people who blew up my house. Look at those people who killed my cousin. Look at those people who did this, did that. The people who also kicked us out here 75 years ago in the Nakba. They're getting back at them. They're getting back at them. There is a question about whether Hamas wanted some sort of violent response from Israel in order to, prop up its popularity.
Of course they did. Yeah, they wanted to erode public world opinion by provoking a response from Israel. But that's using the Palestinians as a human shield and cannon fodder.
Do you think that Israel is playing into that strategy?
Yes, but they had no choice. And what can they do? They, like you said, they had to respond. There had to be a response, but there have been instances where I think there was an instance of like terrorism in India. God, I have to go back and look at the example of a prime minister who decided not to respond with the military operation, but it was a terrorist operation that killed like 180 people in India. And they decided not to respond with the military operation because
They came to the conclusion that it probably would not eliminate the terror organization. It probably would not solve the issues that created the attack, and that the organization in question would, there's a decent chance they would benefit from the response. And so instead, there was a ton of diplomatic pressure levied against the government in question, which hosted the group. And then in the long term, all it did was hurt the organization's image abroad, and then hurt the organization in the long term. And so I'm not saying that that exact solution works here, just doing nothing. What I am saying is that at the end of the day, the Palestine-Israel issue is not just going to be resolved with guns, bombs, bullets, and hammers. And the future of the Gaza Strip is not going to be solved by that. And so I'm very worried that Netanyahu's government is going straight for the hammer, charging in, because number one, that's all they know how to do. Number two, that is all they can do. And number three, that's what they always wanted to do in the first place.
Well, I think you have a valid point with Netanyahu for sure. And for me, the bigger concern is he wants to stay in power, because if he gets out of power, he's going to prison. And so I think, you know, and as the only thing keeping him in power because of the failure on October 7th is the war. So you have a valid point in that it's in Netanyahu's interest to keep the war and the violence going.
Man, do you, I mean, how does this work after Hamas's lost territorial holding is smashed? Hamas leaves. They go in international scene. How does this work?
Well, they already are. They're in Qatar, right? Their
No, I mean, like, what does Israel do? Who does Israel? Because you said that you don't want to see a long-term occupation.
Well, from what I've read, the plan is Israel occupies for a short amount of time, hands it off to an international force. International force props up the Palestinian Authority, and perhaps even they get somebody like Barghouti out of prison or something, Marwan Barghouti, somebody to succeed Mahmoud Abbas, who's old and corrupt, and somehow bolster the Palestinian Authority to govern the Gaza Strip. That's what I've read. That seems to be what Biden's working on.
I don't know how they're going to bolster it enough, considering how much support Hamas has built over 16 years, or the other organizations that are already based there, like Islamic Jihad, that has pre-existing support.
Here's how. You pour in money and you know, all this money that Hamas has stolen from the people, and,
it can't
and you start
be that
rebuilding.
simple as just pouring in money, though, to build that type of support, especially if people see this organization as an extension of Israel, which has been the critique of Mahmoud Abbas to PA for a while, especially if they come in, and I keep using the word especially, but it will be especially true if it's happening, like if they come in right after the Israeli military leaves, because it'll look like that Israel basically installed the PA.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Mahmoud Abbas cannot roll in on top of a Merkava, whatever it is, Israeli tank, and people will respect him. I agree. But look, my ultimate goal, and I think the U.S. and Israel's as well, is for the Palestinians to have their own state. That's the only way Israel has peace. And I think Israel knows that. Israel knows that they're not going to have peace as long as the Palestinians aren't self-governing. Now, here's the other thing that I don't hear a lot, though, is people talk about the blockade by Israel, right? Where's the criticism of Egypt, who participates just as much in the blockade and the governing of Gaza? I never hear any criticism, and that's another thing about, like, Hassan. Never heard him utter the word Egypt once. And so I just feel like, you know, people are missing a lot of the facts of the situation.
I do wish there was more attention to the fact that Lebanon continues to deny Palestinian citizenship, and many other Arab states continue to deny Palestinian citizenships. And I'm not just talking about Palestinian refugees from 1945. I'm talking about third, fourth generation Palestinians born within the borders of Lebanon, not being able to be Lebanese citizens, living on Palestinian refugee camps their whole lives. Now, to a large extent, of course, that is the fault of those who displaced them, and they have to find a resolution for that issue. And the continued statelessness of the Palestinian people is a crime. But on the other hand, as the hosting party, these nation states could have granted them citizenship after the second or third generation. It's saying, oh, but these people need to return home is not an excuse for keeping somebody stateless for the entirety of their life, not knowing anything else outside of living on refugee camps. That's not an excuse either.
Right. Like, I don't know how many of these 2.3 million Gazans are so hell-bent on staying in Gaza. You know what I mean? Like, they have no way to leave and nobody wants them. None of the Arab nations around them. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I was stuck in Gaza, I'd probably want my family to prosper and get the hell out of there. I mean, I imagine there's a lot of them that aren't just like so hell-bent on staying on the land.
There are
But yet
people
they have
who
no
want to
option.
leave. There are others that are staying no matter what. I know Lebanese people who have family members in Gaza who are going to stay in their home, and they're in northern Gaza, and they're going to stay in their home no matter what, because they were moved there, and their family kept getting moved until they're there now, and they don't want to move again.
Well, they're worried they can't come back, I'm sure. Yeah,
Very worried.
I'm just saying
Yeah.
there's probably a lot of people that would gladly leave to get the hell away from all this, and they're not allowed a path to go anywhere by the surrounding Arab countries. So my whole point is just that, like, everybody blames Israel for everything that's wrong in Gaza and for even preventing a future state, but there's no blame for the surrounding Arab neighbors at all, ever.
I think that the primary blame does fall upon the nation state that is holding territory that prevents the creation of a state for a stateless people. But I do think it is ironic that the champions of the Palestinian people in the Arab world, the supposed champions of the Palestinian people in the Arab world, are very quick to use them as a political pawn, very quick to discard them once they find out that the Palestinian diaspora has some kick to it, and they are also very quick to not enable their humanitarian treatment once they are in their home countries. And in fact, bigotry against Palestinians in places like Syria and Bashar al-Assad bombed Palestinian refugee camps, by the way, and bigotry against them in Lebanon, bigotry against them in Turkey, bigotry against them all across the region is a real issue.
Yeah, I really feel for the Palestinians, man. They are treated like shit by everybody in the area. It's really sad. They're just used as a pawn, political pawn. And sadly, Israel gets most of the blame. But, you know, we could argue about that all day. But I think that they're just kind of screwed in general. So I'm very optimistic about the future for the Palestinian people. It seems very bad right now, the situation, and it is. And I don't discount those you know, what's happening there. It's horrific, but I see a brighter future for the Palestinian people if they can get rid of Hamas. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe it'll just fall apart.
I mean, I would like to believe in a brighter future. I just don't see one in the near future because I don't know how the occupation is going to be handled. I mean, to me, this could end up being like 2005 Iraq. 2004, 2005 Iraq. And we're like, oh yeah, we're going to see a nice democratic Gaza. Everything, we're going to have a nice democratic Iraq. Everything's going to be flourishing. Everything's going to be great. And then 20 years down the line, we don't know the hellscape of a roller coaster we're in for. Right. So it's very hard for me to be extremely hopeful when the conditions for hope and the conditions for prosperity in the immediate future just don't seem present. It seems like trying to grow a tree in a boundless desert.
I feel it. I hear you. What makes me a little more positive is that there were lessons learned from Iraq and Afghanistan, and I would be horrified if Israel stepped foot into Gaza without a thorough plan for what happens after they win. Because everybody knows Israel can
out
win.
of all the governments in Israeli history that you think would do such a thing, invade Gaza without a real plan of what to do afterwards for political purposes, which government do you think would be most likely to do that?
Well, that's easy. That's Ariel Sharon, the lion.
Okay, Sharon and Netanyahu, though, yeah?
Well, okay, Netanyahu, sure, but I think Ariel Sharon was like 1,000 times crazier.
Sharon too, yeah. Sharon would 100% do it.
His walk on the Al-Aqsa Mosque was like, holy shit, dude, are you trying to start World War III? Yeah, I see your point, and I think it's a valid point, and I am concerned about Netanyahu keeping the war going because he wants to stay in power because he goes to prison once he's ousted. So it's a fair point for sure. I don't want to keep you all night here. I was gonna do like an hour. It's been an hour and 40.
I hope has it really been an hour and 40? It actually has been an hour and 40 minutes. I do enjoy talking to you. I know this issue is personal for you. I hope I was generally respectful when talking to you about this.
Yeah, I shied away from this topic for the first couple of weeks because I knew my opinions would be frowned upon. But I've leaned into it ever since, and I'm fine. I know there's probably people yelling at me and stuff, and people don't like to hear these opinions, but it's me being honest. And again, I am sympathetic, and you've been nothing but respectful, and I wouldn't expect you not to be. So that's why I talk to you about it, and I don't talk to other people.
Yeah, I got you. Have you talked to many people about this at length?
Other people? No, not at all.
Huh. Okay.
Because people just want to scream at me. They just want to call me a genocidal maniac and that I don't care about Palestinians. I haven't had anybody come to me and be like, hey, I just want to have a conversation. And they just want to scream at me. So
got you. So that means I'm allowed to put Palestinian genocider on the thumbnail since I was so nice in the conversation. I'm kidding.
Yeah, you can frame me as Palestinian genocider. Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. I won't do that. Thank you so much for coming on, though, and talking to me about this.